Came back.
Okay. Welcome, Dunedin Co-housing, Toiora. Oh, you'll have to teach us how to pronounce it. Toiora?
Toiora.
Toiora.
T-O-I, Ora, O-R-A.
It means well-being.
Oh, how wonderful.
Basically, yeah. And it was gifted to us by the local Māori iwi Ngāi Tahu, who owned, well, who had this land and sold it to us. So Toiora began as urban co-housing Otapoti Dunedin, I guess, as a group of people interested in co-housing. And Sue has been part of it from the absolute beginning. I joined a month or two late, no, 2 or 3 months later. And we have just celebrated 10 years since we purchased the site, which was an old school site. And it took us 8 years to do the design and build, because for us, the first thing that happened was buying the land, which I suspect was to our advantage. And then 2 years of build. No, it must have been 7 years of planning, 2 years of building, and we finally made it. Yeah. So we've been moved in 2 and a bit years now. So we were just saying, I'm Ann Thompson. I'm from, I've lived down here in Dunedin now for well over 20 years, 30 years. And it's definitely home, and it's a beautiful sunny day here, and it's Tuesday. So welcome to the future.
I like that phrase. My name's Sue Taylor, and I was one of the people that started this project, and with there's 3 of us to begin with, and very quickly, by the time we put a bid into the site, there were 5 families involved. And I was born in England, but I've been here since I was 4.5, and I grew up in Auckland, and then I spent some time as an adult in Wellington, and then I came down here, and it was the late 70s when I came down here, and I've been here ever since. So I like it here. And as an older person who had a very nice little house in a suburb, but as I was getting older, I was less able to keep it up and do the garden and everything else. And I was beginning to feel, although I had very good neighbours, I was beginning to feel that I wanted something more. And the usual thing that people like me do is we go into retirement villages. But my mother was in a retirement village, and she did not like it. She felt she was over-organised, and it was very expensive. And so I decided that was not what I wanted for myself. So I started looking at other opportunities. And now I live in this amazing place with lots of interesting people from age 84 to well,
about to be.
We've got a baby about to be born in January, my second baby. So we're very diverse in age and in nationalities, because in New Zealand people didn't know about co-housing, but a lot of people who've settled here, particularly from countries like Holland or Singapore, Hong Kong, Portugal, who are really conversant with co-housing. We're really interested in helping to build a co-housing community here. So we're very diverse in culture as well, which is lovely.
Okay. So our plan is we've got a 16-minute video slideshow, and we will talk through it and show you show you around Toiora. So here we go. Hopefully. Right, it says it's loading. I am screen sharing, so you can all see. This is what the site looked like 10 years ago. It was a school site. It had an old heritage fence. It had been one of Dunedin's old schools, over 100 years old, and big trees reasonable trees around it. And sorry, I just realized I haven't got pushed go. So we'll see a bit more of the site. So it's bounded on the road by two sides. This is the high street frontage, and to the right, the road goes down again. As we got started, we held lots of, once we'd worked out the basic design, we had design workshops where we'd introduce people to the concept. This was the drawing, the architect's drawings of what we were going to build, and it looks not far off what we've ended up with. So at the induction workshops, people came along to find out about what it was about, and we wanted to sell them the concept. This is not an induction workshop. This was a family fun day we ran for the community and had 200 people through. This one too. This was in the middle of winter, and I thought it was an utterly crazy idea to have an open air, well, partly open air thing, but it worked brilliantly. This one I think must be Christmas dinner. We've had Christmas celebrations each year since we began. We have built to Passive House standard. I don't know if you know this, but I would totally recommend it. It's designed, originated in Germany. Working bees. Working bees are part of what we do. And this was an old shed with a mural, a brick shed with a mural that was demolished. This was the demolition, after demolition, that came down in half a day, I think, basically. And then quite a bit of time was spent cleaning bricks for the next few months. And the pavers behind had been on the school site, and we've saved both the bricks and the pavers. We've had to move them on occasions, at least 3 times. It took 20 people 40 minutes to move that pile of bricks. It was good bonding. This was some of the people quite early on, probably 3 or 4 years into the design. So the architect who lives next door, who's part of our group, has he had these concept drawings. This is Sue's bedroom, as it was meant to be, of what some of the units would look like. And that helped with our publicity. That basically is, no, that's Tim's kitchen. Yeah.
Tim's our architect.
Yes. And that's Tim's living room. And Tim and his family managed to be very minimalist. I am not. And they are straight through the wall from us, and it looks so different. Again, this was actually the drawing, but you'll see other photos of what we actually have done. It looks quite like that. In November 2018, we finally had broken ground. It was so exciting. And this was the official sod turning. We actually, the ground where we were building had been scraped clean already. And we got these large slabs of polystyrene or something, which are under our foundations. We've got very, very well built. And New Zealand doesn't do insulation very well. We're catching up, but we're way behind. This is, on the left is the original historic school building. And that's the high street that we're on. That's High Street again, with the land scraped. And somewhere around this point, they discovered that we didn't have we had problems with foundations, and it needed a whole redesign, and held us up for 3 months when we'd only just started and was, anyway. That's the story with foundations, I believe. So we have quite a few photos of different parts of the build in progress. This was the High Street block where Sue and I both live, and it would actually got up to the roof of the ground floor, which was great fun. And that's looking the other way, you're looking up High Street. So one of those would be my bedroom. These great thick pieces of insulation underneath, and then the concrete's poured on top, and all those pipes sticking up. I mean, it's fairly standard building stuff probably, but it was really exciting for us to watch it going up. On High Street here, we go 3 stories. So, and that big tent, we bought SIPS panels, was the basic construction. and we bought them right at the beginning of the build and then needed to store them. So these are the wooden bits of the SIPS panels, which are structural insulated panels. They make for very good airtight construction. I'll explain about Passive House in a little bit. And that's when we got to the top floor. Of course, once the outside was all discovered, I mean, many of us hadn't ever built a house before, and then we discovered how long it takes to get the inside done. And you might notice the different doors. We couldn't do a lot of individualization, but we insisted that we would have our own colored doors, and that's, yeah, whatever we feel like. So that the roof in the front is the old school building. That's our common house. And this is from the High Street corner, looking up High Street on the left and Alva Street on the right. This is the Alva Street block. So that has got 6 two-story units, 3 or 4 bedrooms, and a dramatic sky. That's quite early on, actually. We must have only just moved in. Oh, and so I have to explain, we do not do a curve. My husband has a fisheye lens, and just sometimes he uses it a lot. Oh, this is an early morning shot down High Street.
Slightly further up High Street, there's a suburban shopping centre.
Yeah.
You know, that has the usual things like restaurants, coffee shops,
hairdressers,
yes, florists, and
a supermarket,
etc. A petrol station, and so on.
This was the garden group in one of their early meetings. So those who were keen gardeners had taken responsibility for developing our gardens. This was a pile of topsoil, we were told. We're not quite convinced about the state of the topsoil. We did our own landscaping to a large extent, and this was the beginning of digging fence posts for the fences that went in front of our units. We sowed the lawn, and I discovered that you could watch grass grow. This is inside the common house, so it's the old school building, and this is fairly early on by the look of the junk around there. Common house group have it well sorted. This is very early, before any planting. So this was the bare canvas we began with, and it's, on the right here there's a container, and that's where we have our laundry and garden shed, one at each end. Oh, and yes, we have this heritage fence in the front we had to keep and refurbish, and that took a lot of work. In the old school building, we redeveloped it with 3 units inside it. This is the room we are currently sitting in, and a group from a local church who came because they were interested in what was going on. We were talking to them. Alva Street again. I live in the High Street block, so when Ian, my husband, takes photos, it's often of Alva Street, particularly when there's interesting sky. But also, this is the High Street frontage. I should explain that. So this is the common house and the dining room, and this is probably one of our first potluck meals, when you can see all the junk in the corner. We'd only just moved in. Juan's from Argentina, and I'm pretty sure that wine is also from Argentina. And yeah, we eat together 7 times a month on the every fourth day of the month, and that's worked out quite well. There's a corner of the common room which we call the snug, and it moves around. The furniture's changed a bit. The children are a delight, and watching them play on the lawn outside is just such fun. This was an Alva Street garden when it has just been developed. Everyone does whatever they want with their own private land in front of their house. This is the workshop, a very busy, well-used space. that many people who've got tools and that will store them there. We did the fences and the pergolas on the front of our units, and that was a big working bee over a number of weekends. We bought a little concrete mixer to mix up the concrete, and it was a lot of fun. The trampoline was one of the first things that moved in here with one of the first families, and it has been so well used. So these are the fences that we put in. Tim, our architect, designed them and managed the build, and we did what we were told and produced them. It was a lot of fun.
Again, Ian's been using his fisheye lens.
Just a wee bit that time.
So that we're a bit distorted there.
The house beyond, that's actually a separate section, but people who'd been part of our group bought it and built a multi-generational house. That's Tim the architect on the top there. Yeah. And this is in the common house. Catherine on the right is the person without whom this would not have happened. She knew about co-housing and was determined that she was going to make this happen. This is one of our cats.
Is it Mitty?
I think, maybe it was. Yeah, we've also yes. This is frost on the grass in the middle of winter, and the sun coming through the gaps in the roofs and melting it. Ian, my husband, the photographer, is the one on the right. Tim, the architect, is on the left, and the rest of us are busy cementing in holes. And Sue is coming to help. There was a lot of, we had good, Rainer on the right is also a very handy person. He's a jeweler, but he was an engineer in a previous life. And we've used his skills a lot. He's done a lot for the project, particularly in the build. But we learned a lot about concreting and about how to make things go straight and all the rest of it. There are just the wires along the front of each unit, and some people are growing plants along it. And I don't remember this, but obviously one of the mornings that we were doing this was really foggy, which we do get sometimes. There's a basketball hoop for children and older people. We've got one very keen basketballer among us who has represented Otago at one stage. And the trampoline. The 3-story building, 3 of the units are 3-storied, but most of these ones are 1-story single bedroom on the bottom, and then the stairs go up to the 2nd story, a 2-story apartment above. So in this, the 2 on the right are a single bedroom on the bottom, and then 2-story with 2 or 3 bedrooms above. I keep thinking that sky, I think that might be a repeat. I think we've seen that sky before. And more sky. What else?
The area that we bought the land and have built in is actually part of an area very close to the centre of the city, and it's a heritage area. You may have noticed that many of the houses you can see in the background are very old wooden houses. So although the Dunedin City Council, who we needed resource consent from and their cooperation, they allowed us to build a very modern building, but we had to keep some aspects of the heritage area. And that's one reason why we have the pointed tops to the unit, because they are in keeping with some of the other buildings around. And we have fairly small front yards, which again, the old buildings in this area, they don't have much garden in front. So we had to copy that. So there were various restrictions on us, but we managed to convince our city council to be fairly lenient on us and to come along for the ride.
Yeah. Oh, and I think too that, I mean, Tim would have wanted to build something that was sympathetic to the
Yes,
area.
yes.
Yeah.
And he spent a lot
This is, oh, sorry, this is our common laundry. So we've got 3 washing machines and a dryer in here, and people can use that as they, there is plumbing for laundry in each of the units, and about a third of the people use the common laundry. This was the baby shower for our first baby, who was born just before, or just the day before our official opening, actually, in August 2 years ago.
We try to cater for, we have vegans here, vegetarians, flexitarians, meat eaters.
Some who need gluten-free.
Yes, yeah. So we have a system whereby for our meals, we cater for everybody.
Yeah.
So that nobody feels like they're left out in the meals that we cook for the community.
We do have men here as well. But
yes.
That was the that was the baby shower, and it was the women who were invited. Stop share. Okay. So what else can we tell you about this? Let's see. I must admit, having heard that you have been, is it 5 years on this journey and still, you know, looking for the land, I can only imagine how, yeah, that requires a huge commitment to keep going. I do feel, although I'm told that we are quite unusual, that in a sense we began with the land and only about 8 people, and then had to grow from there. The fact that we had the land certainly meant there was we could see that something was going to happen. We certainly hoped something was going to happen. Although I did notice, my husband always said, it was my idea more than his. My husband always talked about if we move in until we broke ground. Once the build began, he changed to when, because he could actually see it happening. We've built to Passive House standard. I don't know if you know that. It's an European and international standard. It's New Zealand. I came from I lived in an old cold villa. We build wooden houses that traditionally have had very little insulation. We're improving that. But the idea of moving into somewhere that was going to be a constant 18 to 22 degrees with no extra heating was big for me. And it's been true, and it's just such easy living, and I would recommend to anyone that they build to Passive House standard. We have, I mean, as is advised for co-housing neighborhoods, we've got a variety of units, so of sizes. So we've got we have 21 units in the new build section, which is most of what you saw, and then 3 units that were built into what had been the old school, that was the common house. And so over there, they're all 2-bedroom. Yes, they are. Yeah, so there are 3 2-bedroom units. The Alva Street ones, as I said, are either 3 or 4-bedroom, depending on where the walls sit. And on High Street here, we've got 6 1-bedroom units, 6 2 or 3-bedroom units on the top 2 floors, and 3 which are 3-storied, and they were designed as 4 bedrooms and a study. And ours, we took a wall out, so we've got 3 bedrooms and a study. We were going to have 5 of the large units originally, because we wanted room for families, but realized as they weren't selling that the cost of them was beyond the families that we would have hoped would be in them. The cost of building in New Zealand is horrendous, and it's got worse since we've built. We were incredibly lucky with our timing. The units cost almost twice as much as what we fondly imagined when we first began, but the housing market had risen. So for most of us, if we were selling houses, we actually, by the time we needed it, we had more money than we could have imagined back when we started. And And because of the way that we signed up our sale and purchase agreements before the build began, we locked in our prices then, and the market continued to go up in the 2 years of the building. So most of us, if we had property to sell, that helped a huge amount.
Another thing that we did that it's hard to do now. New Zealand in the past, it used to be fairly easy to get fixed price builds where you and the people who are building for you have an agreed price, and the builders are not allowed to go beyond that. But because of the way the building housing has risen in cost, now builders won't do that. But we were lucky enough that we came in on the tail end and we were able to get a fixed price build.
Yeah.
Now, I hate to think what it would have been like financially if we hadn't had that. And I don't know, what your building restrictions are in Canada, but do be aware that I think it's fair to say it will cost you more than you think in the beginning. So we did, and apart from that, when we finished our design, again, I don't know what it's like in Canada, but here we had to work really hard to find a bank who would actually finance us. For some reason, all the bigger banks didn't want to look at us. It was a smaller New Zealand bank who eventually lent us the money that we needed. And that was a huge relief to find that, because we had worked really hard to get that. Another thing that comes to my mind that you may be interested in is the way that the question that people often ask us is, how did you select people to come into this project? And the reality is that we decided we wouldn't select people. We would allow people to select us. So we set up a process of educating people who wanted to come in, giving them induction afternoons with afternoon tea and cakes and everything else, where we explained what we were doing and talked about the money side and everything else. And what we found was that people who may not have been good co-housers actually peeled themselves off as we went along. And the process that we'd set up gave them enough information and enough time to decide whether they thought that they could live here. And that worked really well. And it meant we never had to make that dreadful decision of telling people we didn't want them.
Yeah. Basically, it was particularly at that stage, if they would pay us their money, we were going to, we'd include them. Because the way that we did the financing was we knew we had to have signed sale and purchase agreements for all 24 units. And that was the guarantee, as far as we were concerned, for the bank. When Kiwi Bank, who were the bank who eventually were agreed to back us and to lend us the money, they required a 20% deposit on each unit, but also 32% capital overall, which we had to have quite a big push to get that. From the beginning, people lent money to the project, to the company that was set up, and on the understanding that everything we lent to the project would be part of our sale price in the end. And that's just, excuse me just a minute. Sorry about that. My husband's just come down to make a cup of tea. Financing, yes. And so the big push for us, once we had the design done and had got resource consent, we needed to, by that stage, I think we had about 10 or 12 households, units, and we were wanting to build 20. We've built 24 in the end. We had to find that many more people who would put in their money and commit to the project, and that took we added it up the other day. It was 27 induction workshops we ran over the time. And people came in at all the stages. There were a couple of people who had invested the money right early on, substantial sums of money, and they were willing to leave it in for the duration of the build, which was huge. We paid them commercial interest rates, so it was money they'd have invested elsewhere. Yeah. But two of them actually signed the sale and purchase agreements at the point when we needed to finalize the bank loan, and then we on-sold those units when another buyer came in who was going to live here.
Well, that's another point too, is that expect it when you come and get your land and you start to build, expect it to be difficult.
I expect to know that.
I mean, it's incredibly, because I've been here in the project all the time, it's incredibly rewarding, but it does take determination and a lot of patience and tolerance. So be prepared for that. It's not an easy journey, but I can assure you that it's an absolutely worthwhile one. So stay with it.
Yeah. For most of that time, we met fortnightly, and for some periods of it weekly. And our meetings, we use the consensus coloured card system. So
do you use
I don't know
sociocracy?
No, it's not sociocracy. It is a straight consensus. Catherine, who was very key in it, had used this before. So it's using coloured cards that determine the order in which you do discussions, and then the order, the way that you make decisions, and the weight that's given to them. And we've got quite good at that. It's different when you're in the build phase and you're making technical decisions, I've decided. And when you actually are making the relational decisions of how we live together, there's another whole challenge on board. And meetings continue to be challenging in some areas. But people are challenging, aren't we? It's I think we're all learning or being reminded of that people just see things so differently, and we have to negotiate around that. We had a very good lawyer who understood that we were wanting to do something different that was not going to fit into legal boxes. And she actually spent a huge amount of time. I think typically she would meet, there was a small group of 3 who would meet with her, and they did for months working through some of our legal documents. And she would meet for the last hour of the day, charge for that, and then often they would continue talking for another hour or so. I, at the weekend or before the weekend, was going through our old minute books to create a timeline of how we got here. And there was one entry, and there had been mention made of meeting with the lawyer all the way through in this patch of time. But at one meeting, it was reported they'd met for 4 hours on a Saturday and another hour and a half on a Sunday. And I suspect Helen didn't charge much for that. There's something else about the lawyer. But all those things, going through those minute books just reminded me of the stuff that the wonderful thing about it was, you can be really very heavily involved, but not everyone needs to be. And often it's different people at different times. Through the resource consent or the building consent process of trying to chase up people who are meant to be answering the questions that the council had so that they'd agree to our building plans. I suddenly realized, reading the minutes, that was every meeting there was mention of that. And so probably Tim and maybe 1 or 2 others, that was a huge amount of time that they spent.
Yes, and for the people that spend a lot of time along the way, now they have stepped back and other people step forward as the
Good.
need for certain skills increases and the need for other skills steps into the background.
Yeah.
So we did talk about committing to so many hours work a week, etc., etc. But for us, it doesn't really work like that. We recognise that people have different skills, and we trust that they will step forward and work when needed. And on the whole, that works very well. We also, one of the ways we run this place is we run them by voluntary groups. We have a lot of groups. We have a kitchen group, an admin group, a maintenance group, a outreach group, and they're
Common house group, garden group.
And those are purely voluntary, and people sometimes switch from one group to another. And the way that we run it is that those groups, if something is an idea comes up, it's discussed within the particular group that it relates to, and then where they make a report and recommendations, and that goes to the wider community in monthly meetings. When before we started doing that, monthly meetings were very, 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 very long.
Well, not too long, because we had a rule that we would stop at 9:30 unless we had permission otherwise. But yeah, it's helped.
Okay, I'll take a very off that one. But using groups and then it means that everybody is involved in running the place. Everybody has a vested interest in how we live and that we live well.
Having said that, I mean, there was a question before we moved in but what about if somebody decides they're not going to do anything? And it's very clear we have no sanction. We can't force anyone to do anything. But doing things together is more fun than not. I mean, it seems to me that's the main motivation. It has to be that to do something that is going to be of benefit to the whole neighbourhood and is more fun than just sitting in your unit doing nothing. And for almost everyone, that's the way it works.
Yes, very much so. Yes.
When one of the things that came up at the weekend was how special it is having the multi-generational thing. Our children play together and play on the lawn and play in and out of each other's houses. So there's about 8 kids who are pre-teens at the moment, preschoolers and up until 10, and there's some teenagers as well who aren't quite as engaged, but watching the kids playing together is great, and the interactions they have with adults as well. I suspect we've said enough, Sue.
Yes,
we probably should give you a chance to ask questions or tell us about what you've been doing and what your hopes and dreams are.
Well, it's been very interesting. I see that Harriet has her hand up. Go ahead.
Yes, maybe this has been covered. I missed a little bit of the time. I've really enjoyed the discussion. Do people own their own units?
Yeah.
And do they then have free reign to sell to anybody else, or how do you work succession?
Yes. Well, we haven't had, nobody has sold yet, apart from one sold on settlement. So this is what we call a unit title development. So everyone owns their own unit, and the unit title includes a share of the common land and common facilities. That can be bought and sold on the open market. We had originally intended to have a covenant on our titles, which would say that this was to remain as anyone who bought was to agree that they would be part of a co-housing neighbourhood and abide by the principles of co-housing. Because when it came to the final stage, some people who needed mortgages found that banks would not lend to them when we had that restriction on the title, because they did not understand. And we had to, at the last minute, strip everything that said co-housing off our body corp rules, which by law we have to be a body corporate. That's the way that multi-unit developments exist in New Zealand, of whatever sort they are. And so that was the only legal entity that we can be. And the banks were not interested. They were very, very scared of anything that suggested that. They said it would mean it couldn't be bought and sold on the open market, which I think is a fallacy. There isn't an open market for a 5-bedroom house. You've only got the people who want a 5-bedroom house, anyway. Yes, there's a lot of education to be done, because we are the second co-housing neighbourhood to be completed in New Zealand. A third one was finished just short a year after us. There are some others in development, but the way that co-housing works is not yet well understood, either in our legal system or in our banking system.
One of the things that the original group, when we started this, we recognised is that we needed to have good relationships with people like the City Council and with our neighbours and things like that. So we actually did a lot of work in that direction, and we would have afternoon teas for our neighbours, invite them in, get to know us.
Because they wondered what was going on.
Well, they did wonder what was going on. But quite a few people were worried about who we were and what we were doing.
Yeah.
And I can assure we were all perfectly normal people. But for some reason, because people didn't understand co-housing, they were really concerned about what we were going to do here. All we're actually doing is living like everybody else, with a few differences. And
there was one neighbour who said there would be a lot of traffic. And we thought, this is a school site. You must have had, mayhem at 3 o'clock every day. How could they worry about traffic?
But the moral of the story is make friends with all the people that you have to deal with. And, bring them along for the ride.
The council was so supportive. We had wanted to have 2 social housing units as part of Toiora, and the council were the social housing provider who were willing to work with us. In the end, the way the prices went up, they were going to buy 2 small units, because most of their social housing is for single people or couples. And the prices went to the point that they said, we can only buy 1, it will be a bigger unit, and we will sell it when it settles. But they didn't, they weren't going to renege on the agreement they'd made, even if they changed the way it did. So we actually have no official social housing here, which is part of the original vision that wasn't able to happen. Anyway,
we're talking again, so let's give these people a chance.
Sorry, yes.
Yes, having some, including some social housing has been an interest in our group, and it gets very complicated, doesn't it?
It does. The people we thought didn't have money to buy in, and
all sorts of things.
So you don't have any rental. You don't have any rental units. They're all owned by lived in by owners.
Yes, they're all owned, but 3 of them are rented. So
I see.
3 of the owners, things changed and they weren't able to move in at this stage, so they are renting their units. And that's 2 of them. It's been incredibly successful, and 1 is not quite as much. But that's it's how we've said that tenants are equally part of Toiora, and have the same opportunities and responsibilities, and that's worked very well for 2 of the units, and not quite as well with 1 of the others. But
what is it like in Canada? Maybe we should, from the point of view of how people view co-housing. I mean, is it known, or is it fairly new? Or
it's still fairly new, I think. So it's nothing like Europe, Scandinavia, Denmark, and Germany, but it's not. There are people who hear about it and come looking for us, and then we do some education as well. So people have been finding out about it over the last 10 years. There
Right.
aren't very many in most of the existing co-housing that we have in Canada is in BC, which in the West Coast, like most of the US, it started out in California. So I think in BC and Vancouver, Victoria, people know much more about co-housing than in Ontario. But there is a Canadian co-housing organization that is helping all of us spread the word. And of course, we rely on Charles Durrett and a lot of the materials coming from the States.
Sure.
And
Well, we're going to have to play.
yeah.
And some of our people have been working with the city council and the mayor's office in a couple of different, in Hamilton and nearby Burlington. And we don't find people there who already know about it, but we find interest there.
Yeah, that's great.
So especially when the idea is that it can incorporate affordable or attainable housing, some kind of social housing, but Ontario is pretty backward, and Canada is way behind in the building of social housing. So new models have to be created very quickly to house people. Barbara, you probably have more to say about that. I don't know if she's still here.
I don't think we have Barbara.
Oh, yeah, okay. Maybe Leanne, you know more.
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Oh, about
how
familiar are Canadians with co-housing, and especially the people at the city halls?
Yeah, I agree, Ellen. They're not very. We have to educate them, and we also, I think, have to bring them to understand the benefits of it. And so that's still a journey that we're, going to undertake. We've made the first few steps, but I expect there's several steps after that. And because part of our search is also for a development partner, the city is going to be the avenue through which we probably will find developers, designers, folks that work with the city already. So that's one big part of our journey that we're trying to tackle in the next, as soon as we can.
And do developers understand the concept of that the people who are going to live there do the design, or have a large degree of input into the design?
Very limited. The few that we've been in touch with understand. We've met them, incidentally through our conversations or through meeting with other co-housing groups. We haven't had the meetings with serious developers who are unfamiliar with co-housing.
We formed, the company that was formed to buy the land, because we needed a legal entity to do that, was the development company. The fact that our architect was one of them probably helped, because he had to get on with all of us long term, so he had to and he probably drove. He did drive a lot of the design, but it was a learning curve for him as well, of how long it took to do things. And then when Tim advocated for going for passive house design, and there's a company in the North Island who have specialized in that, and they were interested in working with a local finding a local building firm that they could teach and upskill in how to build the passive house standard. And so it got a bit complicated, but I think officially Tim did the basic design with input from all of us. E-House were meant to be overseeing that, and we contracted with a local building firm, a medium-sized firm that could do something of this size. And so they have become the partners with E-House and built their skills to build to passive house standard.
Capital has been one of our bigger hurdles. Majority of us have to sell to fund it. And so that is a bit of a barrier for us right now.
Yeah, that certainly was also. I mean, that's where. So you will be raising a loan as well, though.
I would think so, yes, but we don't have a benevolent member who's willing to put in some seed capital.
No,
that's why we need a developer partner.
Sure, yeah, certainly. How big a a community are you hoping to be building? Do you have any idea yet?
We've said between 24 to 30.
Yeah, seems a good number. Yeah. I always liked the line that we had somewhere in our induction workshops about the ideal size was between 15 and I can't remember what the top figure was, but the point about being at least 15 was when someone was unwell or whatever, when life took over, there were enough people to fill in, but also that if you've got that many people, you don't have to sit beside the person you can't get on with at the time. And yeah, that's probably true, isn't it? Yeah.
I'm sorry if you mentioned this earlier, but I didn't quite catch, how long was it from the time that you began meeting as a co-housing group to the time that you actually bought property?
It was 0. It was 2 months.
We started with the property.
We started pretty much with the property. Yeah. So that's where our experience is quite different from most others.
Yeah. We envy you.
I cannot imagine. I mean, it was hard enough. There was a point, I think it was 3 years in, when we were so tired and we had lost, kind of had forgotten, not really, but it felt we didn't have the energy, much energy left. And at one induction workshop, about 3 households joined in who were all, they got the vision and they were so excited, and it reminded us of what we had been like. And they had energy and passion and and took quite a bit of the load. It was just so good.
Tomato?
Yeah.
Sandwich.
But really difficult to do when to keep going. Passive house. Okay. There's 2 spellings.
Passive design. Joan.
The original German spelling is passive house. Here it's called passive house. Oh, yeah. And there's a wonderful YouTube video called Passive House German Way, described in 90 seconds. I probably could find it if you wanted. I could send you the link to it. It's one of my favorite videos.
Oh, yes, that's good to know.
And it's so good, and it explains it really well.
Are there any other questions?
It is known in Canada now, the passive. Yeah.
I'm sure it would be.
There are engineering firms now that specialize in passive. It's far more exciting than just net zero. The trick with passive house is it makes it very simple to meet the net zero standard, because you're not using a lot of energy to start with.
No.
So the whole house is designed to optimize energy conservation.
Yeah. So it's a complete thermal envelope.
Yeah.
And then the ventilation uses the heat of the stale air to warm the fresh air, which comes in and is ducted throughout the house. Yeah. It's magic.
Yeah.
In the middle of the night, you get up and it's the same temperature.
Yeah. I live in a 1-bedroom unit, and I have not put a heater on in the 2.5 years that I have been here. The larger units are more likely to need to use some heating. As I say, in my unit, I just put on a cardigan over my jersey, and that's more than enough. And it's incredible. And of course, from a a financial point of view is that I don't know what your dollars are worth, but I have never paid more than $49 a month for electricity, whereas in my old house I might be paying $250 a month.
Yeah, so the monthly prices, payments would be way reduced.
Yeah,
Yeah.
massively.
So
massively
there's the big
reduced.
investment for passive house in the building, but you
Yes,
get the reward afterwards, environmentally and price wise.
Yeah, and health wise as well.
And health wise, yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yes, health wise as well.
And Tim would say that the building cost, the additional, is no 10 or at the most 15% on on basic building cost.
Mhm.
So it's there, but it's not like it's going to be double the price.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
And
we're nearing
also-
the end of our hour. Is there one
Yeah.
last question?
Yes.
Yes, come people ask us.
Ah,
Well, I suspect when you're building for 25 to 30 units, you also get some economies of scale with all of
Yes.
these efforts, right?
Yes.
We always hope so.
And there's things like, now there's things like geothermal hubs where
Yes.
geothermal can be used for a collection of buildings, and
Right.
it would seem like this sort of thing would be well suited to that.
We
right.
have a ring mains hot water system, so that for each of the blocks, our hot water is heated by heat pumps at the end of each block, and then is piped through all our units, so we don't have individual hot water heaters or anything. We
Right.
don't yet have solar panels, and I keep saying, but if we had solar panels and PVs, that would give us the power to run our heat pumps, which would mean we had free hot water. How can that not be a saving? The technical getting there is we
Yeah,
haven't worked out yet.
Any more questions? Do free to ask whatever comes to your mind.
Well, thank you very much for this introduction to Toiora and your journey from having the land to the design and living in it for a couple of years. It sounds wonderful, and it's inspiring for us as we recruit new people into our group and move toward finding that land, and in our case, finding a developer to be our bank as we move forward.
Yeah.
Well,
We'll be in touch. I'm sure that Judy will be sending us more videos of what it's like.
Oh,
there.
yes.
Yes, do feel free to be in touch and ask any questions that you like.
Yeah.
Yes.
And once again, I'll reiterate it. Do stick with it. There will be times when you will wonder, what are we doing? Why are we doing this? But it is absolutely worth it.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, thanks
Right.
so much.
And doing things together, of course, you really get to know each other. So it's very good doing something like this with people to develop good relationships.
Right.
But, keep those things in mind when you wonder why you're doing this.
Thanks so much.
Thank you for having us.
Yes, thank you.
Take care.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Tuesday.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.